This is a Flying Cow production.
Well, hello and welcome back to Must Watch Movies. That's right. This is the podcast where myself and Jack Allison force each other to watch movies, good, bad, or indifferent. I, of course, am the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson. And here with me, of course, is my co-host, the Lord Jack Allison, two-time Teddy Award winner. How we doing there, Jack?
Also the good boy. Dude, okay, sorry, real quick.
How many accolades do you want me to list, Jack?
I mean, all the important ones. Real quick, can you? Is my screen changed because I wanted to get the penis off of the screen before we actually start recording?
It is. I was about to say, I was surprised that you changed away from the penis nose before we started recording.
We had the nothing but trouble thing up. We were enjoying some of that. So I just want to make sure I wasn't sure if we were actually doing video release for this or not. So anyway,
no, we're not. Oh, that's lovely.
Okay. So
no, we're not. Believe me, I am not in a state right now to want to be putting myself on video.
Fair enough. But yeah, no, doing all right. We were actually just talking about before we recorded just some concepts for the show and like how to kind of shift some things and evolve some things. And I actually just forgot something that I wanted to pitch to you. I guess for you to consider, for listeners to consider, not viewers, thankfully. What would your thoughts be on us, like potential, like a serious question?
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say I've heard podcasts refer to their listeners as viewers before, so it wouldn't be the first time. But sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna ask what your thoughts would be on us, like a serious question, like on us picking, just doesn't really matter what the movie is, and then just the night before we record, just stay up the entire night, just like not sleeping, like for like 24 straight hours at least, and then record it the next day without having slept for 24 hours.
Well, I will say a lot of times we are recording on work days for me.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't work.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe on a weekend then. I don't know. I just think it could be funny to like see how we review things with like complete, like just brain fog, you know?
I will say me tired is honestly worse than me drunk. Like, I have even less, control or memory of what is going on, so I don't know
that's valid.
how successful that would be as a podcast experiment. But I mean, I don't know, for a second I thought you were pitching like a lock-in style where we just like record all night, and I'm just like, I mean, we could do individual episodes, get a lot done. I don't know,
like what movie would we need to watch that could keep us talking the entire night? That's actually an interesting thing to consider.
Oh geez, I mean,
I can think of a couple.
I mean, I was thinking more of, like a few in a row, but one single, I mean, I mean, that just makes me think that we're gonna end up watching something again like Shot and Tango or something like that.
Yeah, it could be all right. I don't know if we could talk about Shot and Tango for like 12 hours though. 10 hours, 8 hours.
I mean, I don't know. We talked about it for quite a while when you, Hannah, and I did that for the Academy.
That is true.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with that movie. I don't know about all night, but we talked about it for quite a while.
Maybe like with the War and Peace, the 60s, 50s when they made. That was like a 5-hour movie. War and Peace is a pretty dense story.
We could go. I can't remember the French movie magazine that named the third season of Twin Peaks as their movie of the year.
The Return, yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember it. I think it's defunct now, but there was like a very kind of admittedly, I think they even admitted themselves, snobbish film magazine that basically would just trash everything except for like one movie a year. That they would then say was the best. And of course, it would be some house thing that nobody had ever seen. But apparently, the year it came out, they picked Twin Peaks: The Return as their movie of the year, which
good choice. I mean, better than some like normie like IMDb top 250 bullshit.
I mean, yeah, it's it's off the beaten path. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, with a magazine like that, you wouldn't expect them to pick the Avengers or anything. So
The Shawshank Redemption.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
hardly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we should go ahead and get into the movie of choice
Yeah, let's do it.
today because it's been a while since you
minute.
and I recorded.
Yep, you
I
I made you sit and wait and think about nothing but trouble for the longest time. And
yes.
I told you earlier, like you were merciful to me. You had me think about Saturday Night Live, Saturday night for a good stretch.
Yeah. So we are discussing 2024's Saturday Night, which was directed by Jason Reitman, and let's see, starred several people: Gabriel LaBelle, Rachel Sennett, Corey Michael Smith, Ella Hunt, Dylan O'Brien, Emily Farron, Lamorne Morris, and many, 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 many more. This is
Finn Wolfhard for some reason.
I'm sorry.
And Finn Wolfhard for some reason.
Yeah, he's just thrown in there as a random page.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, I kind of liked his vibe in the little scenes that he had. But this is a film basically about the 90 minutes leading up to the first episode of Saturday Night Live, which, if you don't have that date off the top of your head, was released October 11th, 1975. And I have mentioned before, I saw this movie. I had honestly not even heard of this movie until it was reviewed by my film podcast of choice, critically acclaimed. And they were in LA, so they got it a couple of weeks before I did here in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. Honestly, I'm surprised that we got it, to be honest. The theater that I go to around here actually gets like some smaller movies that I wouldn't expect to come here, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm impressed with you, Conway, Arkansas. But when I heard them review it, I was like, that sounds really interesting. I'd like to check it out. Like, I've never been like a huge like I grew up knowing about Saturday Night Live, but I didn't like watch it. I do remember being a young child and coming out while my parents were watching it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they did that for very long in my childhood. And it was never anything that like I really latched onto. I would see things here and there, and friends would share things, and I did happen to have a friend. He and I had an inside joke about a random sketch or things like that. But it's never been one of those things that I like knew a whole lot about or really identified with or anything like that. Although I did, all of a sudden, when they decided to add it to streaming, I decided to try to watch as many of the early episodes as I could, and I literally watched almost every episode of the original cast. I think I stopped in their last year in like the middle of 79.
Mhm.
But so it wasn't necessarily that drew me to it. There was just something in the way that they described it, the fast-paced nature. And let's be honest, this film is like a bullet. Like, it starts and it just goes and it doesn't let up. It just keeps going and keeps building. And I found myself, when I watched it the first time, just obsessed with it, to the point where the very next weekend I had an opportunity to go into town and see a movie, and I had planned to see a different movie. But then I realized that I was going to have another opportunity to watch that movie, and I was like, well, then I can watch a different movie. And I was like, I can either watch this movie, which I'm kind of interested in, but maybe not, or I could rewatch Saturday Night. I'm going to rewatch Saturday Night. And so for the first time in a very long time, I saw a movie twice in a theater. And then, when I suggested this for you, jumped on, I didn't just rent this, I bought it. So I own this now. So, I mean, it's just something that is mesmerizing to me about this movie. And yes, the real life aspect of it, I think is interesting, but there's also something in the feeling, in the tone of this film that I really latch onto. But I've rambled on enough. I'd like to kind of get your thoughts about this. Did you know that this was coming into theaters?
I knew, I saw the trailer around the time that it launched. I was curious about it, but
Okay.
it was kind of one of those movies that, even like with me, like having a little bit more access to some theaters that would show it, like in Atlanta, it kind of just flew under the radar when it actually came out for me. I never, again, I saw the trailer, I was like, hey, this looks cool, and then just kind of vanished for me up until we started talking about it again. Background with SNL with me was pretty steady for a lot of my adolescence. I never watched the original cast, just before my time, and I just didn't really have access to that content like I would have. I probably would have loved to have watched the early stuff, if I'd had access. But again, I watched it when it came on TV at midnight every week. That's like what I did for years. I think I fell off of it around the same time like a lot of people our age did. I'd say like sometimes like in like the maybe late aughts, early 2010s. I just kind of fell off of it a lot, and I haven't really come back to it since. I mean, every now and then I'll see people sharing some weird viral sketch.
A sketch here and there or something. Yeah.
But even then, just doesn't really hold the same place for me, the same kind of spark. But but that being said, I think this movie did a good job. This movie had enough semblances to the SNL that I did grow up with, the earlier, not the earliest, but the earlier casts, that it kind of gave me, it had like a nostalgic feel for me, even though I wasn't again around that time specifically. Trying to think. So yeah, I saw this at home. I saw it on Saturday night on my couch, I guess, which is
nice,
also appropriate.
Okay.
And I will agree with you. I think the pacing with this one is fantastically done. I kind of went into it a little bit skeptical because nowadays the type of movie like this, where it's like, all right, this moment in history or this person in history, we're going to, I went in expecting it to start off like so many of them, where it was like, all right, we're going to open the movie with this, this very frantic scene, this very, very frantic opening scene of everyone going crazy just before the final seconds before SNL goes live. And then it's going to be like, all right, it goes to black. Flashback, 6 months earlier.
Right.
And you find like, Lorne Michaels passing out papers on the side of the street, and some producer says, hey man, what are you doing? Oh, I'm peddling this improv troupe. Who are you? My name's Dan Aykroyd. Who the fuck are you?
I was about to say, you expect kind of a biopic of SNL.
Yeah. I was expecting,
and it's not that at all.
No, and that's kind of the cool pitch that I think of this movie for the people I've talked to about it since. it's the 90 some odd minutes before the first episode of SNL goes live, and all the chaos and drama that goes on leading up until that moment. And so already
Right.
seeing, once that kind of hit me, that's what they were doing. I was like, all right, you've got my attention. I'm invested
Right.
in this already. That's what had me. So yeah, I mean, I guess without going further into detail, that's my overall thoughts. I liked the film quite a lot. I'm glad I saw it. I haven't watched it twice yet, but it's definitely got that
No.
Reitman flair who directed it, and
Yeah.
the cast was, to me, mostly unknown. I saw a couple familiar faces, like
Yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's son is one that I've seen a couple times, but
Okay.
again, the person I probably recognized the most from the cast was, like we talked about, Finn Wolfhard, who has like 4 lines in the entire movie, which I thought was funny.
Yeah. Yeah. But I will say I did like I didn't feel like it was like stunt casting or anything like that. Like he was, I mean, he was a page is
Yeah.
what he was, and he was, you know, he's kind of put down a bit by Lorne Michaels as basically having no idea how to pitch his show, but at the same time neither does Lorne. So I don't know what the hell Lorne's criticizing at that point. But yeah, the thing that I liked, I mean, you know, I've already mentioned this kind of frenetic pace that this because yeah, you know, you as you said, you know, taking off like a shot, and you expect it to slow down at some point, whether they change the venue or something like that or not, but it doesn't. It reminded me of like an Altman style feel, but I don't think, granted, I haven't seen that many Altman films, but I don't think that Altman's ever felt this fast paced. But there's definitely this kind of overlapping, you know, very realistic kind of action of, you know, action is never isolated. No matter what you're doing, somebody else is also doing something. That's just the way life is. And so, of course, there's that kind of overlapping movement, overlapping action, overlapping dialogue. Like I said, that's very Altman-esque. But there's also, so while it's very realistic, there's also a sense of heightened realism going on as well. Something that they pointed out on Critically Acclaimed when I watched it. And honestly, I listened to the review before I went to see the movie, and then afterwards I decided, oh, hold on, sorry, my computer fell off my lap. I decided to go check out or go listen to the review again after I watched the film, just to kind of see, you know, points where you know, because no, I always feel like it's a good idea. I enjoy listening to reviews of movies that I like both before and after, simply because, you know, before it's telling me about a movie and the tone and to see if that's the type of thing that I'd like to check out. But after, I can see if I vibe with the same kind of things that they did, or if I agree or disagree, or if they saw something that I didn't, or if I saw something that they didn't, kind of thing. So I was listening to it again, and one of the things that they pointed out is that you know, there seems to be some sort of like lapse in time, like and I kind of came up with my own kind of theory. It's almost like the studio in which the show is happening is in its own pocket of time that is moving, even though 90 minutes is 90 minutes and it's the exact same things inside the bubble happen outside of sequence with things outside the bubble. Like at the very beginning of the film, when Lorne Michaels, which we just keep saying Lorne Michaels. Let me get the actor's name real quick. Gabriel LaBelle. Yeah, as Lorne Michaels comes out to talk to the page Finn Wolfhard, about what's going on. While he's talking to him, a flaming piece of paper lands next to him, and he's like, "Whoa, what's that?" And he stomps it out. About halfway through the movie, we see the scene where Michael O'Donoghue lights the script on fire and drops it out the window.
Mm-hmm.
There is also a bit where J.K. Simmons, playing Milton Berle, comes onto the set and basically, is, pun intended, swinging his dick around. He's just kind of, showing that he's, the big bad man and all this kind of stuff. Well, he's introduced as being on and around the set and meeting or first seeing Chevy's girlfriend, who's also on the set.
Yeah. She's so fucking hot.
There is then a scene where Lorne Michaels goes to another set to steal can't remember if at this point it's a lighting designer or a sound designer. But basically goes to steal a designer on the Rumpus Hour, which is currently filming with Milton Berle on stage. He goes, steals that guy. The Rumpus Hour is still going on because they're the show right before Saturday night. And then literally maybe a scene later, we see J.K. Simmons still flirting with Chevy Chase's girlfriend or fiance, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
So there's some weird time things going on. But like I said, it's almost as if they're saying that time was moving in a different way I know for a lot of other, part of it is that it's one of those things that you don't necessarily know because it's moving so fast, because it's so stylish and it's so smart and all of this stuff is going on. You don't necessarily notice it the first time that you watch it, but then later on these things kick in. And like I said, it never bothered me because it just made it feel like, oh, okay. Like I said, they're taking it kind of to a heightened level, like it's in its own like time bubble, and things just happen at different times. But yeah, I found that really interesting. Honestly, there's so much about this film that I find super interesting. I mean, there is the historical stuff and all that kind of good stuff, but there's also things that I like that to me are just making commentaries about things that are still happening. Because here's the thing, when now SNL is the establishment. So it's interesting to take a look back at when it was counterculture, when it was the anti-establishment pushing back, and when you hear Lorne Michaels describe this show in comparison to what we have seen is currently going on NBC with things like The Rumpus Room, it sounds very counterculture. It sounds very and it really, I love that scene where Hoffman, sorry, what's his first name?
Julio.
Cooper Hoffman. Cooper Hoffman is Dick Ebersol, basically breaks down for him how the fact that he is even getting to do this show, like, he's like, do you think this is actually going to happen? Because this is like, it really does seem far-fetched that they would have given him this opportunity.
Yeah.
So
it's
there's
a very
that kind of
sort of moment.
Yeah. It's just this great kind of thing, going on. But then there are, some other, character things. I I love Nicholas Braun being dual cast as both Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, even though it is very much a caricature-ish version of Andy Kaufman, because Andy Kaufman I don't think that on his first episode of SNL he walked around using his foreigner voice. He might have, though. It's Andy Kaufman. Who knows? But the way he's pitched is perfect. And it doesn't even bump me too much that Nicholas Braun is apparently a giant of a man playing Andy Kaufman, who I believe was about 5'10".
Yes.
And especially when he stands next to Lorne, it's obvious how tall Nicholas Braun is. Like
he's a big one.
He's enormous. Yeah.
It's kind of like in that Priscilla when like Jacob Elordi shows up and it's like, wow, you're a big Elvis.
Yeah. But then it's also when he's playing Jim Henson, and they're playing on kind of the stereotype. I don't believe that Jim Henson was that easy to run over.
No.
But at the same time,
aloof. Like that, like I don't think he was that lucid either.
I mean, he still plays him with enough of a 60s feeling. I will say one of my favorite bits is towards the end, because the entire shtick with Henson is that he's not getting pages. He's not getting pages from the writers because infamously the writers of SNL did not like the Muppets being on the show. They did not take it seriously. They did not want them there. It does make me wonder, why were they there? Was this Lorne's pet project? Was it something that was thrown on them? There are some questions that aren't necessarily answered. And then there's the whole where's George Coe question, because he was part of the original cast in the first season. But, again, things that don't really bother me because of the vibe of the film. But I love the bit when Michael O'Donoghue finally gives him pages in this nice, sweeping, montage of scenes of the show coming together. He hands him the pages and he goes, "Thanks, Michael." And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh no." It's just perfect, all of this kind of stuff. And then I want to talk about the portrayal of Michael O'Donoghue here too, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk, so we can get to that. What were some of the things that struck you?
Like I said, I think it's very much for the most part an ensemble driven film. Like you said, like little moments between, like, it's not necessarily like a structured film with it's got a 3-act structure, but it's not like it's not very hard in terms of like its focus. The Lorne Michaels character is more so the interconnective, like the transitionary player from the movie, like that takes you through all the different people and their different dramas and woes.
I mean, I do think you could describe him as the lead, because all of the
closest
action stems off of him. Yes.
He's the perspective character.
Exactly. But we are seeing, like I said, we're seeing, moments with, Chevy. We're seeing moments with Dan. We're seeing moments with Lorraine and Belushi and Gilda Radner, and we're seeing bits, and the bit with I keep wanting to say Lamorne, but it's Garrett. You know, we're seeing all of this kind of happening, but it's definitely Lorne and him getting this to all work that is kind of driving all of the action.
Exactly. And it's through him that you also kind of get a more concrete idea of the struggles that people are going through, because it's basically like
Yes.
he's the expositionary point. You know, if you know he's the one that gets brought to his attention frequently throughout the film that John Belushi hasn't signed his contract yet, or you know the suits are waiting on him in the press room to talk about this and that. Milton Berle's up to this and that and the other. There's a phone call for him. He's like the point, the perspective that's meant to build the anxiety. Because of all the chaos that the film is trying to show. Again, I think part of what the film to me is trying to speak is that like the miraculousness that like this group of animals, so to speak, is basically like able to make this such a culture thing. It's like they gave them keys to the kingdom and they threw a house party almost before before mom and dad got home. That's what a lot of the film feels like. And so there's like a lot of great builds in tension, but also comedy that pair very well together in terms of telling that story. Like you get a laugh at moments like that, but at the back of your head, with Lorne Michaels being your perspective character, you're also thinking, oh, this is funny what they're doing to like, you know, Jim Henson with this scene. But it's also like really unfortunate because you're also thinking about the giant page of like the different sketches that they have planned, like that huge wall that the Billy Crystal character is like keeps going over, saying like, "Hey, this is gonna get cut. This is gonna get cut. This is gonna get cut."
Honestly, I love that whole bit with Bill, because you know eventually Billy would join the cast.
Yes,
but you know, this whole kind of you know, tension that starts to because honestly that tension, number one, is done so well, but it's built so quickly between Billy, because we keep seeing bits of Billy, and I can't remember the name of the other comedian who he's talking to, the female comedian. But we keep kind of going through the hallway and seeing little bits of them, you know, getting ready and prepping for the show and stuff like that. And it's not until all of a sudden they look over and they realize there's too much show. Something's going to get cut. How quickly can you do your set? I can do it this fast, but we've got to hold fast. We've got to stand together. You know, we can't let them give us less than 4 minutes, you know, that kind of thing. And then it ends up, you know, where Billy holds his ground and the other comedian doesn't, and Billy walks and she gets the spot, but again, like I said, I don't remember who she is. You know, so yeah, it's just the way that is done, because you can tell that Billy and Lorne are friends. That's how Billy got. I mean, it's not how he got the spot, but it's one of the reasons that he was able to get the opportunity to show how talented he was. You know, and you know, then there ends up being this tension, and he ends up walking out of the first episode.
And what I liked so much about the chaoticness, I guess it's a praise and a criticism to the film doubly. Because I think the idea of the chaotic thing to what you're talking about is the nice thing about it is that it builds in your brain like so much that's going on, so much to juggle, again putting you into like the perspective of the main character, the Lorne Michaels character, in a way that you're reminding yourself, like, again, this is 90 minutes before SNL goes live, and it's either like failure or, you know, like success. I mean, we know what happens historically, but like when you're in the moment, it's like, oh my God, there's so much happening. And that also makes you feel like, okay, well, there's this much going on, but it all feels realistic that it's going on at this time, because again, there's so many different moving parts spinning in different parts of the clock, so to speak. So, you know, with this going on, these are all things that could be realistically happening in the span of time that make it seem like way too much is happening for 90 minutes. But when you remind yourself that they're happening separately, it does
Yeah.
make you feel more entrenched in the drama of what's happening. Where with the
Right.
detriment of it, I think there's a couple points where I think they're kind of aware of that and they take a little bit of advantage of it. I think the
Sure.
key moment that stands to mind is structurally the film needed the quiet moment, especially with like the second act low point sort of thing. But like moments
Sure.
like the John Belushi on the ice kind of come to mind with that being like,
Which
again,
is a great moment.
it's a great moment, and I understand the purpose in the film to slow things down and kind of give you a quiet bit of dramatic introspection. But at the back of my
Right.
head the entire time, I was just thinking, okay, there's no fucking way. This is like 5-10 minutes before they go live. There's no fucking way he
there's
went
no way.
outside in the cold New York, found John Belushi.
I mean, it's
But-
one thing for Belushi to be out there, but for Gilda Radner to also be out there, and for Lorne to be out there at
and
that
relaxed.
point, you know,
Like there's not even any tension.
mean,
They're just like, oh, look at him out there. He's
Yeah.
in his B suit. It's again,
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
charming moment, isolated. But when you're reminded
great
that this is
image. It's a great moment between
Yeah.
John, Gilda, and Lorne. But yeah, I will say that apparently a lot of these stories are infamous stories that definitely happened around this time. Whether they all happened the 90 minutes before the first episode, probably not. But you know, it like I said, it builds the tension, it builds the pace, and it works great.
Yeah, like a lot of this, like I expect, like, yeah, this is all probably based on some truth with some flourishes just for the Hollywood touch.
Absolutely.
I totally am, and I support that because some of it's just like, all right, John Belushi didn't sign his contract and waited 30 minutes before signing his contract.
I mean, I do believe that it took them a while to get him to sign the contract, maybe even the day of the show.
Yeah.
But I will say, it just, I lost it. I thought I had something good to say, but I completely lost it. But that's okay.
I was just saying, I think, like I said, like the ticking clock sort of type of storytelling is very effective. Sometimes abused by people like J.J. Abrams, unfortunately. But but with this film, I think it does it for the most part very well. But again, like I said, like I was saying, where it works to its strength and its detriment both with this movie is that it kind of relies on you to kind of forget about that at certain points, but it is built upon you being reminded of the ticking clock during the most crucial points of the story.
Right.
And again, ultimately, I think it made the better choice. If you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, I think they picked the better choice of just keeping the honoring the clock, so to speak, in terms of going through instead of having this flashback moment with John Belushi.
I was about to say, yeah. Right. Well, because this film is longer than 90 minutes.
Yeah.
It is what is it? It's 109 minutes. Yeah. So it's definitely, playing around, like we said, with time. But
which is so
what
impressive
I was
with that
gonna say before that I remember is, honestly, absolutely. And it's a taut 109 minutes. It plays very well with its time. But what I was gonna say before is, if you told me everything in this was actually fictionalized, none of this happened, it doesn't matter. It's still because of the, I mean, it's interesting to note that a lot of these are based on stories, whether they're apocryphal or not, that did happen around the original cast. It does add an extra layer, but if you told me that it was all 100% fictionalized, I still think it's interesting. It's still an interesting storytelling device, and I think it still speaks on several different levels. Like I said, I wanted to talk about the portrayal of Michael O'Donoghue in this, because Michael O'Donoghue is an interesting figure in the lore of the original cast of SNL. He was one of the head writers. He was on a few episodes, but I think after like the first season or so, he stopped doing so much on in front of the camera because he just it wasn't his venue, let's just say. But I find the portrayal here, he is, I will say, playfully vulgar in a way that honestly, every time he does his kind of naughtiness, I like it. It makes me laugh. It makes me happy. Because it's his way of kind of pushing back at this, kind of broken society. But at the same time, he's the type of figure that is more like he's actually kind of punk rock, because he's not necessarily trying to fix anything. He's more just wanting to show you how broken it is and laugh at how broken it is without necessarily trying to show you how to fix it. Because I think he's cynical enough to feel like there really isn't a way. But his whole thing that he goes through with the standards and practices lady, I mean, that's
a good running thing throughout the film.
The whole thing. I mean, at times it's just like, oh, it's almost a little uncomfortable, but at the same time, in a good way. Like and what's also interesting is the guy that plays Michael O'Donoghue, Tommy Dewey. Have you seen a picture of him?
I'll look it up 1 second.
He looks nothing like that.
Really?
They did a lot of makeup on him. No, number one, he's got a full head of hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was I mean, I will say, obviously, like I said, Michael O'Donoghue was not on the show that often. And I don't know how we measure up necessarily, but side by side comparison or whatever, but he had the right feel of a Michael O'Donoghue type character. And I will say, I think that's where this casting shone in, whether or not you think that any of these actors looked like their counterparts, they all had the right feel to me. Chevy Chase, Corey Michael Smith, side by side, they don't look that much alike, but obviously enough makeup, they looked similar enough, and he had the right feel to me. Ella Hunt had the feel of Gilda Radner. Dylan O'Brien. I mean, honestly, I think Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd was kind of the closest, especially that kind of 70s look that he had. They all had, even Lorraine Newman, the Jane Curtin, they all had that right feel. Even Lamorne Morris as, Garrett Morris. He was the person in the cast that I was the most familiar with because, I was a big fan of New Girl. And him kind of, his ongoing thing throughout the whole, whole film is, why am I here? Which, is interesting, especially when you equate that with Garrett Morris's kind of, legacy with Saturday Night Live, to the point that, later Black cast members would actually criticize the use of Garrett Morris in the original cast. So it's rather interesting and pointed to have Garrett Morris himself ask, why am I here? What am I doing? Am I just the token Black guy? What's the deal here? It's very interesting. There's a bit that I want to bring up because I noticed it the first time, but the second and the third time, I really kind of got a bit of a through line. There is a bit that runs through most of the film between Dan Aykroyd and Lorraine Newman. And I have no idea if any of this is based in fact or not, but it's an interesting character thing to point out. Dan Aykroyd does this little bit where it's kind of, it's like a little flirty thing he does. The first time you see him do it, he does it to Lorraine Newman, and she kind of flirts back with him, and it's this fun little flirty interaction. Well, then he does it to like only almost every other woman in the film. And every time he does it, number one, you see how they react. They all react differently. He does it with Rachel Sennett's character, which I want to talk about her because I found her phenomenal in this film. She was mesmerizing to me. But we find out that they're actually, kind of having an affair. Her relationship with Lauren is very interesting. We also see him do it with Gilda. Gilda just takes it as a joke, basically like, yeah, I'm not playing this game kind of thing, but in that very playful kind of Gilda way. But we always see Lorraine react, because I think that she took it as something more genuine when he did it to her, because like I said, it was the first time we see him do it was with her. And then she sees him do it to every other woman pretty much in the film, and it gives her pause and it makes her think, and it's just a very interesting thing. And then when they practice the construction worker
sketch,
where basically the tables are turned and a man is being kind of objectified by women. And we see how, at least in the way the film depicts it, how uncomfortable he is with that. And how Lorraine kind of turns the tables in that, to the point where he's not sure if she's still acting. But it's kind of like that comeuppance kind of thing, like, yeah, I can play this game too,
in an environment where he really can't back away. He's like, the power is turned because he's now in the spotlight. Right. He's in front of people.
Exactly. And I really kind of liked that little through line that they had of this kind of realization that she was having of kind of the games that men play with women. Then there's the scene we kind of referred to it a little bit, but between Chevy, his fiance, and Milton Berle.
Yeah, good scene.
Where it's a great scene. Where basically, Milton is, kind of saying that he's still the high man on the totem pole. Chevy's got no power, all this kind of stuff, and just kind of throwing everything in his face. I will say the one thing I kept wanting him to say, he's like, I'm Milton Berle, and who are you? I kept wanting him to say, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not. But that actually wasn't a line of his yet. That it, I mean, you can still see that kind of Chevy arrogance there, but it's not fully formed yet.
No, the power isn't there. Just the confidence in his abilities is there, but like not the affirmation of the success.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was actually gonna. Go ahead.
But just these little things, like I said, that come together. It's to me what makes the movie so rich, because it's not just the story of Lorne against the ticking clock. It is also the story of Michael O'Donoghue fighting what's the word? I want to say fascism, but that's not completely correct.
The power.
But
the censor.
censorship. Yeah, censorship. It's also, the little, sexual dynamics between, Rachel Sennett and, all of that going on. And then the power dynamics, with, Dan Aykroyd and Lorraine Newman and, the Chevy Chase stuff and all these tasty little things that are coming together to make this tapestry of this film.
Mm-hmm. I that actually transitions to a question I had for you for this film regarding the cast. Who would you say cast member, character, actor wise, was your MVP and your your least MVP?
That's tough.
Mm.
Because like I said, different people caught me in different moments. I will say, of the characters who I was not already familiar with, like I said, Rachel Sennett grabbed me.
Yeah, she's great. She's a fantastic actress
in this film. She's and I will say, I think I've seen maybe one other thing that she's in, but this makes me want to see a whole lot more of her, because there's just something so dynamic. Like she's just so interesting, because she's very playful, but also professional, but also her whole thing with Belushi, where she's, in one breath, praising him and almost flirting with him, but at the same time taking him down a peg by making him wear this, bee costume, and, just all of the machinations that she has with Lorne and Aykroyd and all this. She's just such an interesting character, but at the same time, I respect her as a professional, and I think she knows what she's doing. I believe that character is a good writer. She just she puts so much across with such little effort. Like I understood so much about the character within the first couple of scenes that she was in. And then after that, it was just enjoying, what she was bringing to the table kind of thing. And it was, that was great. As far as the characters that I was familiar with and kind of appreciating the familiarity of what they were bringing to the table, I think the ones we haven't mentioned it yet, but I really did like the portrayal of Matt Wood as Belushi. I think that his kind of, the way that he sums up just this kind of gunpowder energy that Belushi had is feels very real, feels very true to Belushi, but at the same time feels also like he's bringing something to it himself. But I think the one that I appreciate the most is Ella Hunt as Gilda Radner, just because there's just such a sweetness and because the way that she has portrayed Gilda is kind of the glue of the cast. She's the one that any of them can go to, but at the same time, she's not a mother, but she's the safe one. She's, the one, she's friendly, but she's not going to be the one that's going to blow up. She's not going to be the one that's going to be, an egotist or anything like that. But I think that they can all be her friend, and she's just got this calmness and
Approachability.
joy.
Yeah.
Watchability, likability. She's just, and again, it's that kind of ineffable quality. Like there's no one thing I can point to that made me feel that. It's just this overall sense, because she's the one often that is like, she's the one that talks to Garrett to bring out, his unease of all of this kind of stuff. She's the one that seeks out John. She's she's kind of, like I said, she feels like the glue, and that feels very Gilda Radner to me. It feels, for a performer that we got so little of, it feels like a love letter to her, this portrayal.
Yeah, I liked her performance quite a bit. I agree with you on her being the type of glue within the cast that kind of united a lot of the people within like the tougher times. Like she was always the one that kind of kept her cool throughout even like the worst of situations, and didn't let her ego like overtake her at any point. Regarding ego, I think my personal MVP would probably go to Corey Michael Smith's Chevy Chase, which funnily enough was the one I was kind of most skeptical about going into the film from the trailer. Not even just because of the look. I think that Chevy Chase, while we've talked about him before, while I have mixed feelings about him as a person and an actor, I think he's such a personality that I think is like one of the trickiest and hardest to juggle the balance of accurate representation, but also capturing what brought people to him as like a fandom. I think he does a good job.
I was about to say, watching this movie, I remember the appeal of Chevy.
Yeah. And I think like we talked about earlier with him, with his portrayal, I think that he did a good job of showcasing like the talent that Chevy Chase had as a comedian, and like a natural charisma that he had when it came to like the confident sort of like, but the bombastic kind of confidence that he was associated with, and still is to this day. And again, before the massive fame tainted like him further than what he was. And seeing those very slight but very like subtly like appreciative like vulnerable moments, like his interaction with Milton Berle, although funny, you do see that oh shit moment, I'm like in over my head sort of thing, in a way that he does get really
it's great
in more ways than one. And I think the actor conveys moments like that very well. There's also moments where you see him showcase like a little bit of goodness inside him, like when he backs up with like the suits in the room trying to get their attention with Lorne Michaels, and Lorne's not really getting the attention. Same thing with like the Weekend Update thing. He steps in for his friend to not just boost himself up, of course, but also to kind of help diffuse a lot of tense situations with what he knows he is talented at, which is something that I honestly don't think that the Chevy Chase today would necessarily step in to do for somebody else, unless it's more beneficial. Was there anybody in the cast that you felt like was your opposite on the end of the spectrum, like your anti MVP?
A weak point. See, I don't know. Like I'm looking at the cast list right now. I will say not performance-wise, because like I said, I really liked the beat between her and Dylan O'Brien as Dan Aykroyd, but I did think that Emily Farren as Lorraine Newman looked the least like Lorraine Newman. But yeah, honestly, I will say, just to throw it out here, we haven't mentioned Willem Dafoe as David Tebbutt, which he's great.
Yeah, he always commands
David
the room.
Tebbutt. And just that, like, I believe that he just kind of the way that he manipulates Lorne to kind of feel, in control and ready, but at the same time, I fully expect him to put the thumbs down and the kibosh on this whole thing.
Like all the times that he empowers Lauren with something, whether it be a remark or an action, there's always like a tinge of threat to like, there's like a backhand to like the side of the compliment that he always gives. There's always like, he always has like something like venomous undertone to anything he says that could be on the surface considered as positive.
Oh, it's honestly, it's kind of delicious the way that he delivers his lines a lot of times. Like I said, that could be taken in one way, praise and affirmative, but at the same time a threat. It's like, okay, like it's really, really interesting. I will say the Paul Schaefer, I think that they pulled off the look, but he didn't read as Paul Schaefer to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see that.
And I wish we'd gotten a little bit more from George Carlin.
Yeah, he was one that I wasn't crazy about either so much.
Yeah, I mean,
for similar reasons.
There were bits where I felt like it. Yeah, exactly. Where there were bits, I will say he actually looks a lot like George Carlin at that time with the look and everything. But yeah, I would have liked more. But at the same time, I understand. I mean, there are so many people in this movie, and there are so many moving parts, and there's so much going on. It's hard to, like I said, the fact that George Coe isn't in this movie, again, I didn't think about it until afterwards, but I'm just like, it's weird that he's not there because he would have been at the time.
Right.
But like I said, it's really hard for me to find a least among this, but if I had to, those would be the closest I could come. What about you? Did you have?
It's tough for me too. I think if I had to pick one, again, for reasons we've talked about, I would probably say Nicholas Brahmas, specifically Jim Henson. And it's not, again, necessarily saying he does a bad job, but I just feel like with the rest, compared to the rest of the cast, his of Jim Henson felt more like a caricature than it did a character itself.
It was definitely a caricature. I will say though, his Andy Kaufman was definitely a caricature, but it felt.
But Andy Kaufman's always a caricature. You can argue with him
exactly, but his performance of the Mighty Mouse, was so spot on, and the way Lorne said, "Thanks, Andy. Save your voice."
Yeah,
I've kills me every time. Save your voice, Andy. It's just hilarious.
I think the double casting may have even been part of like what resulted in like what we got with the Jim Henson that I take umbrage with, I guess, is because when you're cast as a double, especially two such iconic people, there is a pressure on you as an actor to make it as distinguishable or indistinguishable as possible. And so with that in mind, I feel like maybe he just kind of went more towards the extreme to maybe make more of a separation between the two. And again, I understand that. I guess between casting the same actors,
I will say it actually took me. It wasn't until the second viewing that I realized it was the same person.
I was more so curious. I found it when I saw it just because I was curious who played Jim Henson. Then I saw, he played Andy Kaufman too. I didn't recognize that.
I was about to say, it wasn't until I looked up the cast.
But I mean, otherwise, I think the cast all in all did a great job of representing their characters in a very humanistic way for the most part, and not in a way that felt like it was mocking or cynical or making impressions of. Again, it kind of gave them a lot of life, and it made me kind of want to go back and rewatch the original show. I told you after I finished it that I looked up the first sketch on SNL, the Foreigner, with Belushi. Because I was on YouTube, and I ended up finding actually my wife found the first season on DVD at a thrift store, so I was like, all right, we got it now.
Oh, okay.
So I got to enjoy
I was
that
going to say,
now.
I mean, it's all on, I think, Peacock. I actually watched not in its entirety. I did skip because honestly, just like SNL now, it's hit or miss. There's some things, and honestly, there's some things that would have hit then that don't hit now because they're so topical.
And the movie even seems aware of that too, because a lot of the times that we get references to famous sketches, there were ones that didn't make it in that first episode, like the famous Dan Aykroyd, Julia Child thing.
The Julia Child,
Like they paid homage to it, but they didn't actually.
Right.
That wasn't in the first episode, so there'd be no reason for them to have it in the first
episode. Right.
And
I
even the
will say
Bumblebee
that,
thing, while that's built up with the John Belushi character, it's very different from what we kind of had set up within the actual episode.
Yeah,
the killer abuse.
Yeah, I will say though, watching the first episode, the thing that struck the most.
What's that?
The woman that they got to play Janice Ian, Naomi McPherson, looks, and I don't know if they just played the audio from the episode, sounds exactly like her. Like, really? I'm like, did they just reincarnate this woman? Because like it's almost exact.
Really?
Yeah. It's eerie how similar, because she's singing through the background through a couple like a scene in the movie, so you get to hear a good bit of it, and I listened to a bit and I was like, that's like eerie.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
It looks almost exactly like her. Like it's really, I mean, I don't know if it was just a lot of makeup and costume, and I mean, whatever it was, they they did a great job.
Yeah, it's like kick-ass, good casting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, right on. Well, any closing thoughts on this movie?
I was about to say, I feel like I could talk about this movie for another few hours, but I think I've said everything
that in mind.
Right. Yeah. I think I've said everything that I found especially important to say. I really enjoyed this movie. It's just there's so much, I feel like it's speaking even to where we are now in terms of, because there's a bit of in the terms of, kind of fighting against the establishment, there's a bit of protest in the style of show that they were putting on, and like that really resonates in the time that we're in right now to me. Finding any way to protest against things that aren't necessarily going the way that they should.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right. Well, as you said, we are looking into different things to implement. We might be looking at different ways to choose some of our movies, or maybe just things to spice things up a little bit. But we won't be implementing those today, mainly because we came up with the idea right before we started recording. But I do want to go ahead and let people know how to get into contact with us. You can, of course, contact us on Twitter and Instagram and Blue Sky at the Flying Cow Pod. You can also email at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. Excuse me, I am silently hiccuping. But that is how you can get into contact with us. Jack, anything you want the people to know about?
No.
All right. Well then, Jack, it is your turn to decide what you're gonna make me watch next. So
okay. Well, you put it that way.
Just keep in mind how much you liked this movie.
Well, I know The movie that I've kind of gone back and forth in this one because I wasn't entirely sure even going into this recording what I was going to be picking, but I'm thinking now
Mhm.
about it now, and something that I've wanted to pick was an animated film because we haven't covered one of those yet for this podcast, and I'm a big fan of those.
Was a what film?
An animated film.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot of picks because I'm a big fan of animation, and
Me
there's a
too.
lot of great animated films that are in my top spots, and even on my
Okay.
list. But I figured since this is similar, I guess, somewhat similar to your previous movie, it's still it just left theaters, it just came to streaming, and it also happened to be my like SNL was for your favorite of last year. This I think was my
Mhm.
favorite movie of last year.
Oh,
And
okay.
I just recently saw it, so I'm going to preface that saying that is subject to change, but it's something that I definitely want to talk about. My pick for next time is 2024's Flow.
Okay, I have not seen this. When you said animated, I'm like, what is he gonna pick that I haven't seen? Because I've actually I watch a lot of animated films,
Hmm.
but I have not seen this one. So, all right, we will be talking about that one then next time. But until that time, moo. Okay.
We did it.